My name is Bryce, and I'm a dreamer. Both waking and sleeping, my rich and vivid imagination has been keeping life interesting since I was very little. So I'm going to share those dreams with you, and I'd love for you to share your dreams with me. Let's do this together in a little place that I like to call Somewhere in Dreamworld. Everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Midnight Notion Somewhere in Dreamworld podcast. My name is Bryce Kalla. I'm your host, and today's episode could have been brought to you by video games. It's not a food this time. Video games is actually sponsoring this episode, which is really great because I don't know if you knew this, but you could buy a video game if you wanted to from a store that sells video games. And then you could play it on a system or a handheld thing or on a computer or on an app. There's a lot of ways to play video games. So try video games today. We have a guest again this episode, and this is Daniel Mauleon.
Hello. Hi.
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for welcoming me on. I'm glad I jumped on the gun. Here's some things I like about dreams. Yeah. Can I be a guest?
I posted on my personal Facebook page that I'm doing a podcast about dreams, and Daniel is like, hey, I like talking about dreams. I'm like, that's all you have to be on this podcast. Come talk about it with me.
Well, this is my first ever recorded anything. So I was like, I listen to podcasts. I'm like, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll be cool enough to be a guest. And so it's like, please let me talk about dreams. No one else wants me to.
So note to everybody else, if you want to talk about dreams, it's that easy to be part of this podcast. Well, also, I don't think I would let a stranger come.
That hurts a little bit. It's that easy. Okay. I gave reasons.
Yeah, there are definitely other things. But also, I just found out we have the same favorite game.
Mm-hmm. So Link's Awakening, we talked about for probably an hour before recording this. And so we probably won't talk about it for another hour on this.
Right.
But yeah, it's the Zelda Game Boy Color? Game Boy game.
Game Boy, yeah.
Later remade into a Game Boy Color game.
The DX version.
That's all about,
or something.
Or mostly about dreams.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's my favorite of the Zelda games. Mostly nostalgia, but it holds up very well. And like you said, it has a lot to do with dreams. But then we also have another common interest, another frequently overlooked thing. I feel like not a lot of people know about Link's Awakening. They focus a lot of time on Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time. But Link's Awakening is so good. Play it. Hey, and guess what? It's a video game, which is the sponsor of this episode, or could have been. We also have another thing in common, that we both like the TV show Awake.
It was an NBC show in 2012,
14,
13, around recent. There. Yeah, closer. That I heard about. It was like a mid-season launch, and it's some weird psychological cop show, and you're like, whatever. And then I watched an episode halfway into it. I was like, this is fascinating.
Oh, really?
And then
so you started in the middle.
I caught a piece of the middle, and I was thoroughly confused. But then read about it and liked Jason Isaacs, so I was like, okay, I'll go back. I'll try it out. And for anyone who's never seen it, which is everyone listening to this podcast, it's a cop procedural starring Jason Isaacs, who played Lucius Malfoy.
Yeah.
Yep. And has some great voice acting work. But essentially, it opens with him in a car accident with his wife and son. And then he wakes up in a world where his son is dead. And the next day he wakes up in a world where his wife is dead. And he alternates between two realities and solves crime. And it's amazing.
And in the stuff that he's a detective, but the crimes have things in common. So he starts where someone parks in space number 140 or whatever, and then in the other reality, the criminal lives in apartment 140, and he starts seeing those common themes, and then people start looking at him like he's the cause of them, and so it adds this extra element of Like, which one is the real world, and is like who's like, is this a thing? I don't know. It's
I like to. I was thinking about it on my way over here. I like to think of it like a really tight kind of like Lost, where it's like you have this really bizarre element, but there's only one really bizarre element, and it's not about solving 500 of these mysteries. It's solving what existence is he living in.
yeah.
But on top of it, you have a really solid, I think, procedural, and you have some really, really great relationships. And that's, I think, where the show shines is his relationship with his different partners,
And his family,
and then like individual people. His therapists both play really big roles. And it never, at least on the first season, doesn't set out to answer anything. It kind of it peels things away, and you think you know how it works, and it's great.
When I saw the first trailer for it, I was like, dreams, yes, sold. and so I watched it from like when it was airing, and I set aside time every Monday or whatever.
Thursdays at 10.
Okay,
that's why I didn't stick around.
But it got announced that it was canceled before the final episode aired, and I was very upset because I loved the show so much. But then the final episode for me was very like it felt fine. It felt like a good ending. So whereas something equally, or like something like Firefly that was amazing and got canceled way before it should have, that could have kept going on. But I feel like this is complete as one season.
That's a good thought. I think no, I think I agree with like the ending is very much open to interpretation. In a way that does feel kind of has a more concrete end. I'm not as upset about that as I am about like a Twin Peaks finale, or a Lost finale where it's like, what, this, like, it's unanswered. Whereas this, it opens up a whole new door and understand for this character. But I would absolutely love to like have it revisited. It never will be.
I just hope everybody watches it so we can talk to more people about it.
It's like, I want to get into that last finale. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But I definitely think it's worth checking out. It's got really great direction, really great acting.
Cinematography is wonderful. Too.
Wonderful. But yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, what do you say we talk about our dreams?
Let's do it.
All right. I think it's time to go to sleep. So Daniel, do you remember your dreams regularly, or?
Yeah. I could recall last night's dream. Not that there's anything of note to it.
Yeah.
But I'd say I dream and recall dreams probably every single night.
Do you keep a journal or record them to your phone or anything, or?
Not currently. I have in the past.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of weird work. I think it's more just like having that to be the first thing you do when you wake up. And honestly, I'd rather just like slowly get up and take a shower and go on with the day than sit down and take that time.
Sure. There are other priorities sometimes. I feel like once you get to this point where I feel like we're both at a point where we remember so many of them that it isn't that much work to recall them. That if someone listening doesn't recall as frequently, you can train yourself to recall by regularly writing them down and recording them. And doing that work actually gets you to this point where it's just an everyday thing almost. And part of it is sleep, I think. But
I know. I don't know how long ago I heard this, but like essentially everyone always dreams, and it's just whether or not you train your brain to think. It's important for me to think about my dreams. It's important for me to remember my dreams. And if I don't journal them, I'd say like every other day I'd probably bore someone with them. Specifically my girlfriend, who when I told her I was coming on this podcast was like, thank God you can talk to somebody else about this. Because I have a lot of very nonsense, not important, just goofy stuff. I'm like, but guess what?
Yeah,
this happened.
You had to have been there. You got it. Let me just explain it to you.
And then you say it, and you're like, oh no, that was dumb. But I'm glad I told you anyway.
Right. Did you bring a big like just one dream that kind of sticks out to talk about today?
I did. It's not necessarily like life changing or anything like that, but it was really. It very much kind of set this tone for my childhood and what I would expect going to sleep. In general, when I was younger, I'd still probably always really remember dreams. So it was a really regular thing. And I'm trying to date this, but I'd say somewhere between the ages of like, the range of 3 to like 8. It's going to give you a nice long window there. definitely had frequent nightmares, definitely had lots of random things that happen, but there's one that sticks with me. And that is the haunting of the gingerbread man. It's probably the best title I could give it.
Okay.
And it ties to my preschool. I was in an ECFE program, and one day we had crafts, and I made a paper cutout gingerbread man. It was like a piece of cardboard paper, like brown construction paper. I think we sprinkled like brown sugar on it after some glue,
Of course.
stuck on M&Ms and gumdrops, and you made this little gingerbread figure. And
Not
absolutely,
the
like,
gumdrop buttons.
right, yeah, just like very standard. It wasn't creepy, it wasn't scary, it was just a craft. And I brought it home, and it got pinned on a cork board above our computer. And I don't know if it was the first night after that or sometime after that, I started having these recurring nightmares that would show up in, I think, like one of 4 different forms. If I was staying with my grandparents, they lived in a different house. The dream would be I'd just be like in their living room, and there'd be like a knock on the door or a noise at the door, and I'd go out to the porch, and on the other side of the screen door would be the gingerbread man. He'd just be staring at me, and it's like the middle of the day, and I would maybe call for help. I would maybe ask for someone to come visit, or like, oh my gosh, he's here. But most of the time, I think I would stare at him, and I would just do that.
Was it the same size as you, or is it?
No, it's still like a foot, not even a foot. Like I'm trying to think, 8 inches, couple inches tall. And of course, I was younger at the time, so like maybe like 2/3 of me or a third of me or whatever that would be. But it wasn't anything like monstrous. It was very much just this gingerbread man, and just like. And then maybe I think took on a form of maybe some malice or anger or whatever.
Sure.
So there's that. And then some versions, if I was like sleeping in my bedroom with my, I think we had a shared bedroom with my 2 other siblings or one other sibling, I'd just be in my bed, and he would grab me out of my bed and drag me out of my bed. Yeah. It's intense. And the way the house is set up is there's like one bedroom, a long hallway. In the middle of the hallway, there's a different bedroom. At the end of the other hallway was my mother's bedroom, and then somewhere else on that same stretch of hallway was the stairs leading down to our living room. So the idea I think was to be that it would grab me and drag me down the stairs, and usually at some point I'd wake up. The other version would be, again, not like in any place, but I'd be like a grocery store, and you'd just be walking through the grocery store with mom, and then you look on the banner and they're selling gingerbread cookies or like gingerbread men, and you'd look away and you look back at the banner, and one of the ones that was up on that banner is gone. And then like throughout the entire shopping experience, you turn a corner and there he's just like watching you, or he'd be like 3 aisles down, or he'd be at like at the other register, and it was just like, it's like pure horror.
Yeah.
In this like non-horror figure, and it haunted me, and I told nobody about it. And the last one, and the one that was like the most, probably I think the most terrifying, is if I was like sleeping in my mom's bed, I would wake up or in my dream in the middle of the night, I would be in like a tug of war where my mom was holding on to me and pulling me, and this gingerbread man is pulling me the other way, and it would just be that in like an indefinite amount of time of being tugged between like this like figure and my mother, and just like that until I'd wake up. And I didn't tell people about it, which is weird. And I think part of it was like I didn't want my mom to get rid of it because she really liked the art. Like it clearly was like up on the wall. I don't know how long. It's hard to say again. Like how did I get to be like 5 or 6 or 7? Maybe. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we had ever moved with it. I don't think we did. It must have been at that same house, and we would have moved around like 3rd or 4th grade. So it probably happened before then. At some point I finally told her like, yeah, I had this dream about that gingerbread man. And she's like, we can just take that down. And then it was just over. And it just ended.
Really?
And so it just went from being this thing that I would see every single day, and then I would dream about, probably, I'd say about half of my dreams were like of this like gingerbread horror. And then that was it.
And that was a thing, remind me, that was one that you made.
Yes. Yep.
So your own creation is
my own. Right. Yeah, and that was like, and I don't remember like doing that craft at school and being like, oh, this is stupid or it's scary, or ever having fears before then. It just took on this other form in my dreams, and then would be like during the day, I would look at it and I would see it, and I'd be like, is it there? Is it watching me? And I can't recall too much of those. I really recall the dreams very vividly. The day-to-day sightings of it, not so much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was as simple as just throwing it away, and then it was done.
Weird.
Yeah.
You know, I had a similar thing with, in the first episode, I talked about a wolf dream that I had. And there's something about wolves, pretty much my whole life. I don't know if it was before or after the it feels like it might have been impacted by the dream.
Right.
I know that there were a few movies that I had seen that had like a nasty wolf in them. I was really into Disney's Peter and the Wolf. They had an animated short on Peter and the Wolf, and that wolf was very terrifying to me, and it feels like that's the wolf that was in the dream. But at the same time, after that, because of the dream, there are a lot of paintings of wolves where they're just like staring out, and it feels like they're piercing my soul. You know what I mean? Like I have a problem looking at them sometimes because it feels like it's that dream reliving, and so it's interesting to me that just I don't know. It seems like such a peaceful thing. You made this little art. You didn't seem like you were not necessarily proud. It wasn't like like I hate this art, but it just shows up, and that's the symbol used in this dream that's like attacking, and it's basically Slender Man, but the gingerbread man.
And I honestly, like, now it's easy, really, really easy for me to go back and laugh at it. Like, and I honestly, if I tell the story, it's not like I had this really serious dream. It's like, guys, I was haunted by a gingerbread man as a child, and like it just shows you dreams are just like can really take any form that is nonsensical, but then you attribute this meaning to it, and it builds into something else. But yeah, like I look back at those and I remember just being like haunted, and even as a kid realizing how ridiculous it was. That was maybe part of why I wouldn't bring it up, is like, yeah, I'm haunted by the gingerbread art I hung on the wall. Like no one gonna like respect it. Like, okay.
Did it talk to you at all, or was it just like, was it?
I don't think so.
Was it its exact, like, did you say it was paper or cardboard?
Yeah. So the craft itself was a construction paper, some like glued on food stuff.
So it was just that.
It was that. In the dream, it's hard to say. I want to say it was a little bit more fleshed out.
Yeah, a little more like an actual
it wasn't
cookie.
It was more like an actual. But again, it's an actual cookie, not like a small monster. It was just still this like representative of this holiday treat.
Wow.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I mean, there are so many different ways to analyze dreams. There's that sort of subconscious mind. There's a spiritual side of things. Anybody can take their own meaning from it. But I do know that I've read or heard, or a mixture of both, that when you're in that REM state of sleep, most of your body is shut down. And that's where most of the dreaming occurs. And the one thing... the one part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is where you process most of your logic, and that is off. It's just completely off. So it's just kind of a mixture of things you've seen and habits and feelings and emotions all kind of smashed together. And that's why we kind of wake up and go, that didn't make any sense. Well, of course it didn't, because there's no logic, because that part was off.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think it's really interesting to think about the element of sleep paralysis there, because like, again, I'm either at the door staring at it, I'm like being dragged out of the bed, I'm being torn, like not torn in half ever, but in none of them am I moving. I'm always still or stuck.
Right.
I don't have that agency to like get out of there or do anything, which I think is pretty typical of a nightmare of many forms.
Yeah. A lot of people, I don't remember if I touched on it on the first episode, but there's that thing where your brain is telling your body to run, but your body's asleep.
And you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild. Chris, have you ever had actual sleep paralysis where you wake up and you're still... Really?
Yes. So for a while, I think also, not only have I dreamed and like recalled my dreams frequently, as a kid, I'd have equivalent to like a lucid dream where you'd like, oh, I'm dreaming. Oh my gosh, this is weird. Like a really key one for me, this is another big dream as a child, was I was in a dream. I was in a cabin. A snake killed me. I died. I went to heaven. And I got to heaven, and in heaven, the angel was like, "You're not actually dead. You're just dreaming," and like sends me back down. And I go talk to the snake, and I was like, and the snake's like, "You're alive again." I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm not actually dead. I'm dreaming." And the snake's like, "Weird," kills me again, and I go back up and like bounce back, and it wasn't scary. It's very goofy, and I woke up being like, "Whoa, I knew I was dreaming." So like clearly had that lucid dreaming element, which. In college, I decided I like read a little bit more about it, and I was like, "Oh, lucid dreaming is really interesting," and then made an attempt to practice it. And from that is where I had my like experiences with sleep paralysis.
Really?
So I don't know how much you know about lucid dreaming, or what sort of things you've researched or studied.
I am so glad the conversation is going this direction, because I have looked into lucidity, and it sounds to me like one of the most. It sounds like an adventure.
It's phenomenal.
It's really cool. I did work at one point to try to get myself to lucid dream. And for those of you listening that don't know what lucidity is, it's basically what Daniel just said, that you realize you're dreaming, but then from there are able to kind of change the events of the dream, or at least be a little more cognitive about your decisions.
So to give an example, so I started practicing this about a year after I left New York. I was in New York for 3 months for an internship. And so I was nowhere near there, and I missed it, and it was a cool place. And so as I was studying lucid dreaming, I gave myself the goal of I would go back and visit New York. That was the thing I read about, is you really want to give yourself an intention for when you figure out you're lucid. So in a dream, I realized I was lucid dreaming. There's tons of, I will leave it up to the internet for people to kind of learn about reality checks and things like that.
What did you have a real, I mean, I want to get into this.
Okay,
actually.
let's go. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about this, because so what the internet says, and what other what have been in books and all that stuff, is typically you kind of develop some sort of a tick, right? Or some sort of a habit in real life that shows up in your dream because it's something you do on the regular, right?
Yeah. So the keys to lucid dreaming, first and foremost, is a dream journal. I honestly believe you won't get it done without one. It takes that step of I care about my dreams to the next level. Then you have reality checks, and they can be things like, for the most part in dreams, words and numbers don't hold a state. So if you looked at a wall and had some writing, and you looked away and you looked back and it changed, that's usually a key, like, that's weird.
Yeah.
And you hope that would trigger you to then do a reality check, such as check the time on your watch, have a conversation with someone, even ask them, like, am I dreaming? Or what I frequently do is put my finger through my hand, which is where you like poke your palm. And how it appears in my dream is that like the other side of my palm like stretches out really weird. And
because in the dream state, you see all these other things, but you're not really in control of how they, or you kind of are, because it's your brain. But,
right. But until you're lucid dreaming, it goes, and it just keeps happening, and it's happening to you. You'll interact with it.
In physics and certain things, a lot of people say the light switch is a big one, where when you go into a room, you turn on the light switch and you look at the light to see if the light is turning on and off. And in the dream state, you don't necessarily have electric wiring going through the architecture.
And I've definitely done relay checks that have like duped me. So I've done the thing where I've poked my hand, I've seen it stretch and been like, yeah, I'm not dreaming. And I've woken up later and been like, oh, what the hell? Like, of course I was.
Yeah. I have a really great one. At the time I was trying to do this, I had a watch. I don't typically wear a watch anymore, but I had a watch, and I would every once in a while, just randomly throughout the day, stop, look at my watch, and watch the second hand go for 5 seconds, and I would count along with it. Understanding that in the dream world, time might not work the same way, or the watch might not function the same way. And so I started just stopping and watching the watch. And I would tell people about this too. So it became a big part of my life. And I was talking about this attempt at lucidity. I had a dream where I was at a big table with a lot of friends around, and the person on the other side, we were eating a meal or something. I was telling that person about my adventure in trying to lucid dream. And I told him, all I have to do is look at my watch and count for 5 seconds, and then I should know whether I'm dreaming or not. I said this in the dream. And I woke up the next morning going, no, I was that close.
Well, that's what I think is, I honestly think with dreams, there's so much of it's like your intention and what you want out of it. And so when you don't talk about dreams, you don't remember your dreams. And when you start remembering your dreams and caring about your dreams, your brain's like, this is important. And so honestly, it's that state where then it gets into your dreams to the point of like exhaustion. Like once you're lucid dreaming, there's this weird sense that your brain doesn't want to keep you lucid dreaming, at least where I've been. I know there's people who kind of, I think, push past that to it's never an issue anymore. But you have to be very cognizant to stay lucid, or it's really easy just to drift back and out. But yeah, no. So to bounce around to some other topics. So what I would do is I would go I'd try to dream, and once I figured out I'm lucid, I'd do a reality check. And then I usually always start with flying, because flying is just amazing.
It's wonderful.
And then if you've ever flown in your dream, it's great. And if you do lucid dreaming, like there's a second level of like thrill to it.
Yeah.
And I think what's great to describe is that when I wake up from a lucid dream, I'm not more exhausted. I'd almost think that like my brain has been working overtime. Instead, I feel like incredibly refreshed, like really relaxed. But so I'd fly, and I remember flying to a room, and then like I was in a room that was all white, and I made the cognizant decision in my dream, like I wanted to go to New York, so I'm going to go to the street where I lived on when I was there, and I pushed down the walls, like very mindfully pushed down the walls of the room I was in, and as I knocked each one down, it brought me to that street, like spot on that street. And then I like walked to 7th, and then I like kind of just like ran down 7th. And then of course like things start to get weird and dreamy. But it was a very, like I can still very clearly see those moments in my head visually now, which I don't think you carry over with as many dreams or even like other memories. But then to get to your final point, or your first point, whatever you want to call it, of the sleep paralysis, had it happen a few times where you wake up and you're lying there and you're like, oh gosh, what's happening? Because you try to move at first, and it is a little like unnerving, but I think is a totally fine thing. And one thing I will say for people who are like excited or interested in lucid dreaming is when you go online, you'll read a lot about sleep paralysis and like seeing a figure in your sleep paralysis. Yeah, and it's usually described as like this like dark or shadowy figure that'll stand over you, which is like, again,
which is usually just a gingerbread man,
right? Yeah. It's usually supposed. People take it, I think, as this fear or this face value, and I've read lots of comments and posts where people are like, "Oh, I was horrified. I never want to do that again." Right. And I'm like, no, I think that fear of it makes it scary for you when you wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is also the actual medical or disordery sort of version of sleep paralysis, where you can actually be so afraid, your body is still in that sleeping shutdown mode, but you're so terrified that you can't move it, that you can actually kind of hyperventilate. And
I had not heard of that.
Yeah.
I would just say is do some research, but I'm guessing that's probably few and far between. Yeah. But look into that too.
Yeah, definitely. Just see if you're having sleep problems, definitely see a trained professional, because that's not
listen
us.
To us for that.
All right. With that, I think it's time to wake up.
All right.
So Daniel, now that we're now that we're all awake, is there anything that you have dreams of doing in your waking life?
Totally. So if I'm honest with myself, I'd call myself a writer. It's not what I do for my day job. It's not what pays the bills, but hopefully one day would be. And so specifically, I write comic scripts. And so I've written a few single issue things. I've written a complete script for a book. And so my dream of dreams is to kind of keep working down that road, get some things published, drawn, illustrated, all that.
So the one that you've written for a book, you're saying that you've written it, but it hasn't been published yet?
Yeah, so I have a full about 260-page script I've gone over a few times, and it's a large enough project that might be kind of tricky to do independently, so I'm trying to see if I can go a traditional route, at least at first, but otherwise just kind of finding collaborators to work with. Cool.
So if anybody listening to this wanted to help make that dream come true, how can they find you?
I've shared a little bit about it. My Twitter handle @Tonucci, that's TONUCHI. But for now, that Twitter is mostly just like memes and political rants. And I do share comic related stuff on there frequently. But I'm trying to be more open about the creative work I'm doing.
Sure. Awesome. Well, with that, we have reached the end of this episode of the Somewhere in Dreamworld podcast. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Coming on. And thank you to Video Games, who could have sponsored this episode. If you would like to submit your dream to this podcast, please do so at midnightnotion.com or phone it in at 612-643-0944. I'd love to hear those dreams, and I'd love to share them on here. And I will be doing that once we have a big old batch. We'll do a whole episode of just listener dreams. So anyway, with that, I've been Bryce Kalal. This has been Daniel.
Hello. Goodbye.
Hello, goodbye. And this has been the Midnight Ocean Somewhere in Dreamworld podcast. Until next time, sleep well, dream well, and be well.